Hello. Thought I'd do a little rant on the topic of circumcision, specifically child circumcision. So let me preface this by saying that, like, if my parents circumcised me, I wouldn't speak to the motherfuckers anymore. No, just I would not have any kind of good relationship with them. Luckily, they didn't. Now, they didn't even get me fucking, what's it called? Baptized? Like, I'm the only one in my entire extended family that they forgot to baptize. Something about being too fat to fit in the in the dipping bowl. But no, foreskin's intact. So mom, dad, spasiba for not betraying me and butchering my baby dick. So, question, who gets circumcised? So you got your Jews, you got your Muslims, for like religious reasons, right? Which I don't really want to get into because I'm having quite a good day. Wouldn't want to ruin that. But then, like, a third category emerges. Fucking Americans, right? Between 50 and 75% of our overseas bros had their little Yankee Doodle snipped, which is odd, right? Like, why? So there's actually two separate questions there. One is like, why did the trend of circumcision take off in America? Because 100 years ago, they weren't chopping their dicks off. That's the story for another day, but it's an amazing fucking story. Actually, if you ever see me out, buy me a drink and say, Sasha, tell me the story of why Americans started chopping their dicks off, because it's a wild fucking ride. But that doesn't really answer why circumcision is still quite popular there. The first thing that needs to be said and made absolutely clear is that there is a consensus, right, in the medical community. Doctors, medical practitioners, scientists all basically agree that child circumcision is something that is at best unnecessary, right? But at worst carries significant risks. And this is not to mention the massive fucking ethical question. Now, granted, you can hop onto Google, put on your confirmation bias goggles, right? And find me a study from like the Jerusalem Institute of Foreskins, which will say something like circumcised boys are 12% less likely to get dick cancer, are 13% less likely to transmit STDs. You can find shit like that if you really try. And like, even if that were the case, it's still a very strange argument to make, right? For example, do you know that if you chop off one of your tits, you're exactly 50% less likely to develop breast cancer, right? Yet last I checked, we don't go sticking, boobies and guillotines. Thank God for that. So yeah, it's a strange one. Like, what other body parts do we amputate in the supposed name of health? None. So if you're watching this and you're circumcised, I'm sorry for you. No, but I completely get it, right? Like, it's hard for you to be objective because, pardon the pun, but you got some skin in the game, right? Like, you're kind of invested in the idea of, well, my parents circumcised me, I turned out fine, what's the big deal? But it's important that you detach yourself from your personal circumstances and ask yourself the very honest question of like, well, if your parents didn't circumcise you, would you opt to have the surgery now, for example? Are you going to put your son through the same ordeal now that you know that there's literally no reason to do so? These are very important ethical questions, I feel. And you got to be honest with yourself, right? Try and be the bigger man here. Not just look bigger, but actually be bigger. Oh, so tiny footnotes. It does sometimes happen. We're talking like 1 out of 1,000 births where you're born and something's not right. Like, God fucked up. He was wasted when he was making you. And your parachute didn't open properly. So the doctor says, like, look, if you want Billy to have a normal sex life, we gotta operate, we gotta circumcise. That does very, very, very rarely happen. Also, what can sometimes happen is like you get into an accident later on in life, right? And then, they also recommend, like, we had this kid in high school, he got into some fucking bicycle accident. I don't know what the fuck he did, but basically he had to get circumcised as a teenager, and I think he even got made fun of it for Broken Dick Nick was his nickname, I think. But yeah, that does happen, but that's not what I'm talking about today, right? It's not that every Muslim and Jewish person is born with a defected dick, right? These are exceptional circumstances. So like one of the first bullshit arguments you might hear is, well, it's more hygienic to get circumcised. Well, it's really not though, right? Like, do you know how to wash your hands? Do you know how to roll your sleeves up to wash your hands? It's the same fucking thing, right? Like, teach your son basic hygiene, and then you don't gotta worry about him having a cheese fondue party in his pants, right? Like, granted, there might have been a time, 1,000 years ago, right, when Moses was wandering the desert, no shower in sight, sweaty balls, sand in his pee hole. Maybe it made sense to get circumcised, right? Or when soldiers went off to war, had to sit in the trenches, getting trench dick. Again, I can kind of understand that. But we're not in those times, right? Like, teach your son basic hygiene and you'll be good. In fact, the people who keep claiming that it's more hygienic are actually just revealing more about their personal hygiene than they really should. All right, so here's a gem that you'll hear from like American chicks. They'll be like, oh my God, circumcised dicks are just so much hotter. Well, Tiffany, that's just like your opinion, man. I don't know, are they? Maybe. Or maybe someone's been watching too much American porn. It's also a possibility, right? No, look, there's a lot of bad reasons to cut your son's dick off. This aesthetic one, right? Like, it looks nicer. We want little Billy to look like other boys in the locker room. Like, bitch, you are not fit to be a mother at that point, right? Like, no, we don't do that. It's not a trendy haircut. Actually, on the topic of aesthetics, like, last I checked, granted it's been a while, but something like Michelangelo's David, right? The fucking sculpture, like the pinnacle of the male form, right? The ideal male body. I'm pretty sure David's all there, right? Like, they didn't chisel away at his little marble dangling. Oh, this is the depiction of the Jewish David, right? Isn't David Jewish? Why doesn't he have his foreskin? I hear some parents saying like, well, we want what's best for our kid. You vaccinate your kids so we have the right to circumcise. It's really not the same fucking thing though, right? Like, you vaccinate your kids because if you don't, your kid will fucking die. That's not really the case with circumcision, right? No doctor is like, oh, we gotta, chop little Ahmed's hot dog off if you want him to live. Like, here in the UK, for example, the NHS, right, the National Health Insurance, it doesn't cover circumcision. So that should tell you something about how unnecessary the procedure is, right? So Jewish and Muslim communities, they gotta pay for that shit out of pocket, which I'm sure they're not entirely thrilled about. But that should tell you something, right? Where like when parents get defensive, they'll be like, well, we make decisions for our children all the time. And like, yeah, you do, right? Like, you decide how funny to dress them up in the morning. You decide what school to send them to. But like, even sending them to a Jewish school or Muslim school, which I think is quite fucked up too, religious schools, at least in that case, they still have the opportunity to like outgrow the indoctrination, right? No amount of like squeezing or praying is gonna magically like make the foreskin reappear, right? That salami ship has sailed. It's an irreversible decision. Right, so I know it's very rich of me to talk shit about everyone's parenting when I have produced exactly 0 climate parasites of my own, but I don't think you need to be a parent to like know that cutting baby dicks is morally bankrupt, right? Like, I can't imagine a scenario where I have a son, right, little Sashi, and like I'm in the delivery room and the first thing that comes to my mind is, nurse, scalpel, bring the cutting board, stat. Like, no, what the fuck is wrong with you? So actually, here's a fun exercise for you. Imagine we get visited by aliens, right? How would you explain to aliens what a circumcision is, right? Like, so a child is born. Yes. A perfectly healthy baby boy. Uh-huh. And you take a sharp object. Yes. And you slice away at its most sensitive, most private, most intimate, reproductive organ. Yes. All to appease an invisible man in the sky? Si, senor, si. They would get the fuck out of here, man. They would hop in the UFO, Be like, fuck you, barbarians. Before I get accused of anti-Semitism, let me be absolutely clear. I actually have nothing against circumcision, right? In theory, like provided it's done on a consenting adult. So if you're Jewish, shalom, and you have a son, why not, hear me out, why not wait until your son is like of thinking age, of speaking age, right? Maybe at his bar mitzvah, be like, Jonah, do you want a PlayStation 5 or a cheeky trip to the butcher's? And if at that moment, little Jonah is like, Papa, I want to be a real Jewish boy, then fucking mazel tov, right? L'chaim, like that's great, that's awesome. I support that shit. You cut up as much foreskin as your little Jewish heart can handle. You know why? Because we do stupid shit to our bodies all the time. Like I got a hammer and sickle tattoo I'm stuck with for the rest of my fucking life. Some of you thought like septum rings are a good idea. It doesn't fucking matter, right? Because it's your body. You fuck it up whichever way you want. So that's actually the crucial thing. I should just start with this idea of body autonomy, right? So having control, having domain over what's done to your body. Well, it's hard for me to think of anything less body autonomous than like, oh, there's a healthy boy, let's cut his dick off. Okay, so I know I'm conveniently glossing over some of the nuance here, right? For example, in the Jewish faith, it says like the child must be circumcised on the 8th day. I don't know why. You get 20% off, but you can't keep the tips. Also, like the longer you hold off with circumcision, the higher the risk of complications. But do you see how these are not exactly good reasons for circumcising, right? Like I'm yet to hear a convincing argument for what gives you the right to chop off on a piece of someone else. And answers of like, Rabbi Minzberg is insistent on it, or Allah wills for it. That's just not fucking good enough, right? That's just not good enough. So, in conclusion, right. Okay, this is gonna sound like another one of my radical atheist ideas, but I just don't think we should be cutting baby dicks. Let's normalize not cutting baby dicks. Okay, so this rant was anything but short. If you're still here, congratulations. I hope you've learned all about the magical world of baby dick cutting. I thought I'd reward you for your patience and your morbid curiosity with a little joke. It's a joke that my dad told me a few months back. He said it in Russian. I'm going to say it in Russian first. And it goes like, «Никогда не покупайте жареные кольца кальмара у евреев», which roughly translates to, you know what you should never buy next to a synagogue? Fried squid rings, fried calamari rings. No, it'll get there. I have faith.